Hello Year 10 and welcome to Lesson 2 on Fate and Destiny in Romeo and Juliet. Again, you can see the picture there of Romeo and Juliet at the end. That is where the play ultimately ends up. But just before you do this lesson, you should have a good understanding of fate and destiny from lesson 1. So make sure that you do not start this lesson until you have looked at lesson 1, because that's the background really as to why we're actually doing this over this next 2 lessons as well. Make sure as well that you have your Romeo and Juliet text with you, especially Act 5, Scene 1, because we are going to be analysing that extract today. So I'm going to be taking you through about how to analyse a 15-mark question and how to do it quite quickly, I suppose, even though we're not going to do it really quickly. I'm going to just take you through it step by step. As I said last lesson, the major themes in Romeo and Juliet, but we are focusing on fate and destiny. And there you go, on the right hand side, highlighted in blue, is the question that we are going to focus on today, and we are going to analyse the extract and annotate the extract. So typical question is read the extract on the opposite page. In this case it's going to be Act 5 Scene 1. I will attach it on to show my homework as well for you, just in case you don't have your own copy, but I think most of you do anyway. So the question is then, what does the extract show an audience about Romeo's thoughts and feelings at this point in the play? Refer closely to details from the extract to support your answer, and that is worth 15 marks. And again, look at where it says the audience. You know, you are the audience. So whatever you are thinking, then the audience would be thinking the same way. But of course, you do have to think as well that there was also an Elizabethan audience sitting there watching this play as well. Okay, so just when I talked to you yesterday, or rather last lesson, about the writer's use of language and structure, that is what we're going to focus on. And you've got your top 3 bands there, which I'm not going to go over again, but just very quickly, the idea that band 3 you can comment and begin to analyse. Band 4 you can discuss and increasingly analyse the writer's use of language, form and structure. And band 5 is to analyse and appreciate the writer's use of language, form and structure, the idea of evaluating, this idea of having a different perspective on things. You could band 5 you just shows a thorough insight into what Shakespeare is trying to do. Right, we are going to look at the extract. Now it's right at the beginning of Act 5 Scene 1, and on the left hand side here I've said to you, make sure that when you do go into the exam, now the only reason you're going to know this is that if you know the play and if you know the plot, sometimes you can guess. Now sometimes they will tell you what is happening and what has just happened before this, but this is the bit where Romeo is waiting for news from the friar about how he can be together again with Juliet, and Balthazar comes into the scene and tells him about Juliet's death, or the perception that Juliet is dead. Of course we as the audience know that she's not. It's all part of the friar's plan. So it does start off with a soliloquy at the beginning. So if you remember, we talked about a soliloquy, and that was a character who speaks on their own, their thoughts aloud, so the audience can hear what they're saying. So I just wanted to do a quick glossary there, really, just anything that you weren't too sure about. So again, if you want to put me on pause here, just really, you might want to just go through and just pick out those things that you might not be familiar about with. So the idea of presage is or presage is an omen or a warning about something. You've got bosom here, which refers to the heart. So the bosom was referred to the heart in Elizabethan times. Unaccustomed spirit, so it kind of feels the spirit within yourself. It's an unusual feeling, so unaccustomed. You don't normally have that feeling. Kindred is another word for kin or family. And you've got this idea of lodging at the bottom, which we know is to do with place. So it's the idea that what he means here is it's my place, or this is what I intend to do, this is where I'm going to go. I just really wanted to make that clear to you, really, because it just seemed a little bit odd to use that word in the middle of that line there. Right. So what we're going to do, everyone, is I'm going to take you through not everything in the extract, but we'll have a little read through first, and then we'll just take it through and just pick out really important elements of this extract. So Romeo then, this is what he's saying at the beginning of Act 5, Scene 1. If I may trust the flattering truth of sleep, my dreams presage some joyful news at hand. My bosom's lord sits light in his throne, and all this day an unaccustomed spirit lifts me above the ground with cheerful thoughts. I dreamt my lady came and found me dead. Strange dream that gives a dead man leave to think, and breathed such life with kisses in my lips that I revived and was an emperor. Ah me, how sweet is love itself possessed, when but love's shadows are so rich in joy. Enter Balthazar, booted. News from Verona. How now, Balthazar? Dost thou not bring me letters from the friar? How doth my lady? Is my father well? How fares my Juliet? But I ask again, for nothing can be ill if she be well. And of course Balthazar, then she is well, and nothing can be ill. Her body sleeps in Capel's monument, and her immortal part with angel lives. I saw her laid low in her kindred's vault, and presently took post to tell it to you. Oh, pardon me for bringing these ill news, since you did leave it for my office, sir. And Romeo, is it even so? Then I defy you, stars. Thou knowest my lodging. Get me ink and paper, and hire post horses. I will hence tonight. When they're saying, I took post to tell you I'm on my way, it's the idea of delivering news to you. That's what it means there. And when he said this was my office, this was my job to do this, to bring you news of Juliet when I had news. All right then, so what we've got here, I'm going to go through just a few quotes that I think are really important here. Now I know that we started talking about fate and destiny last lesson, and about how the audience really did believe in this, and Shakespeare through his characters also shows this. But the question here is actually saying to you, what are Romeo's thoughts and feelings here? But you can't escape the idea that it is all about fate in this extract, because this is all he talks about. And he talks about, the idea of sleep, and sleep was often told to you through the idea it's true. Whatever you dreamt about, it was giving you a message. And the idea of dreams does appear quite often in Romeo and Juliet. That big speech that Mercutio does, Queen Mab. The idea that, this little fairy comes in and manipulates your dreams. So they did feel that when they did dream, that it had to be some truth in it. It had to be some sort of premonition. So what Romeo's saying here is that, my dream, if I may trust the flattering truth of sleep, my dreams presage some joyful news at hand. Sleep told truths, like I said before, and Romeo wants this to be true. Well, of course he does, because he's actually talking about the idea that Juliet comes along and revives him and makes him this emperor, which we'll talk about in a minute. So again, presage is an omen or warning, normally associated with something bad. If you think about an omen, it normally is something quite bad. So I suppose here you could say that juxtaposition's been used. This idea that it's bringing, even though it's something that's bad, actually it's bringing some joyful news for him. So I suppose you could say here, this idea of juxtaposition that Shakespeare's using suggests that Romeo might be quite puzzled by this. So he knows it's an omen, he knows it's a warning in his sleep, but it's joyful. It's a joyful warning. Okay. The idea that, he talks about my bosom's lord sits light in his throne. Bosom is the heart, and he uses personification here to suggest that he's ruled by love. So the idea that love is the one that sits on the throne, which is Juliet. Juliet symbolises that love for him. And when he says here about unaccustomed spirit, this unusual feeling that he has, don't forget, he's been banished and he's not used to feeling so happy, but now he's lifted with the hope that Juliet will come to save him. That's all he's waiting for. He knows, he trusts the friar. and he thinks that this is going to be it. She's going to come, she's going to revive him, and he dreams it in his dream, and he only picks out the things in his dream that he wants to believe. But notice, actually, he dreamt a dream that he was actually dead. So it's almost foreshadowing what's going to happen. But of course, he twists that, and it turns into actually Juliet comes along and revives him. And the idea as well here is that the term dead could also refer to the fact that that's how he feels inside at the moment. It gives a dead man leave to think. And even though he's talking about this idea that he dies in the dream, I think the idea that he feels dead inside at the moment as well, because he's just waiting for Juliet to come. This, when he says about being revived, at first he talked about a throne at the beginning, about sitting up high, about how love makes him feel this way. But when Juliet comes along and revives him, he becomes an emperor, and he becomes higher in status than a king. He will feel elated, high above the clouds almost. And notice here the use of exclamation marks. It's excitement at being revived and rejuvenated by Juliet. You know, you can see it as you go through it. All the exclamation marks just make it sound like he's so excited at the idea of Juliet coming to him. And this, when he sees Balthazar, look at all the constant questioning, which shows his eagerness. Apologise about the spelling error there on Romeo. And notice how Balthazar is silent through this exchange. We know that Balthazar is Romeo's servant, and we know that he's not going to talk over his master. But he's silent because all these questions that Romeo is asking him, he knows he's going to have to give him bad news, because he's going to come to tell about Juliet. And look at this little bit here, the bit when it says, you know, I saw her laid low in her kindred vault. The reasons why I picked that out as well is because that's a dramatic device that Shakespeare has used here. Remember when we talked about the idea that because these families are both alike in dignity, they're very, very wealthy, and in Shakespeare's time they could afford to have family tombs, and that's where they would all be buried. So the idea that it's quite handy here, because it means that Juliet in a tomb can wake, which is the plan, and actually escape from the tomb and get back to Romeo. Of course, if it was any other way, if it was a person of poor social status, then that story couldn't be told. But the idea that, you know, Juliet can escape from it, yet here's Balthazar telling Romeo that actually no, she's dead. She's actually dead within that vault. And also as well, when Romeo, right at the bottom here, I've not done a little arrow for it, but this right at the bottom here, and he says, I defy you stars. So you know this idea of personification is used quite a lot in with Shakespeare and in Romeo and Juliet. And the idea that, you know, they're controlled by fate, they're controlled by love, they're controlled by the stars. So here personification has been used again, but Romeo's got no interest in the stars' alignment now. He believed that Juliet was the one for him. He believed in his heart that Juliet was for him, even though they were from enemy families. But we know differently, and we knew that they were star-crossed lovers. But Romeo chooses to ignore that, okay, and he will now take his own chances. But we know that about Romeo. We know that he is in himself, and we've talked about fortune being fickle. Well, Romeo is also fickle because he just acts on impulse all the time and doesn't think before he acts. Maybe that's got something to do with the wheel of fortune. Maybe that is Fortuna, okay, spinning her wheel on Romeo's life. Okay, maybe that's what the audience might be thinking here. Right, so you've got here, you've annotated the extract, and you really need to be thinking about 3 or 4 quotes. That's all you've got time for really in this 20 minutes, 25 minutes extract to write about it. So you really need to be picking out 4 really, really powerful quotes. Ones where you could talk about language, where perhaps you could talk a little bit about structure, you know, maybe the punctuation, etc., and the way that Shakespeare puts it together, and also where you could actually talk about subject terminology as well, you know, why Shakespeare's using this device in the play, or rather in this scene. So you can see there that I've actually picked out 4 quotes, but you could choose any 4 that you want to. So I've gone with my dreams presaged some joyful news at hand. I revived and was an emperor, me. And here what I've put is, sorry, it's not really obvious, is it? Because you can see the quotes. I've not put quotation marks around it. But I've put here, just as a little aside, I would mention the use of exclamatives here as well, which is what we talked about before. It's excitement, as well as the idea of the word emperor. And when he says, "How now, Balthazar, dost thou not bring me letters from the friar?" That constant questioning. So that's structure. The idea where how Shakespeare puts something together, and then right at the end, "I defy you stars." So make sure that you track the text. Take something from the top, take something from just below, and take something from near the end to show that you've actually tracked the text. Don't just take it from the top. Right, so just to demonstrate it really, depending how deep you are going with your lesson 1 work, and you might be exploding the quotes there, but don't forget with those quotes that's looking at the whole play, not just Act 5 Scene 1. So here you can see I've actually exploded this quote. The first quote I've actually chosen here, the idea of juxtaposition, which is what I said before, presage and joyful, so the omen and the idea of being joyful. It suggests Romeo's puzzlement here. He has no news yet from the friar, so he doesn't know what's going on. Okay, so he probably is a little bit confused at the moment as well. The idea as well that we talked about dreams before and sleep told truths, and Romeo wants this to be true. This is a contrast to earlier in the play when he dreamt some vile forfeit of untimely death. It shows that he chooses what to believe. Now, I wouldn't normally advise you to go back to earlier in the play when you're doing an extract question, but I thought it was quite good when you're thinking about a general question about fate, about how at the beginning he did dream about something that was awful was going to happen, and yet look at now, he's trying to twist that into something that's actually is going to be good, that is going to something joyful is going to come to them. And again, I've just put that idea of presage at the bottom there, but you know what that means now. Right, so a challenge. If you want to do this, it is optional, but you will, at the end of lesson 3, you will be doing a bigger question, the 25 mark question. But it's up to you. You can do this question if you want to. If you do want to do it, you can send it to me and I will mark it for you. So there you go. There's your question on the right-hand side. And again, it's, what does it show about Romeo's thoughts and feelings at this point in the play? And refer closely to details from the extract to support your answer. And it's worth 15 marks. And it's recommended that you should spend 20 minutes on this question. But you can spend quite a lot at this stage because that is fine, because you are still learning this. So have a quick look at the waggle. In this extract, Balthazar brings the news of Juliet's death to Romeo. The audience is aware of Friar Lawrence's letter that informs Romeo of the plan, but the young lover has had no such news. However, at the beginning of the extract, before Balthazar arrives, Romeo, in his soliloquy, is in an unaccustomed spirit. He thinks, "My dreams presage some joyful news at hand." The idea of him dreaming this suggests that he wants this to be true. After all, sleep tells the truth. This is a contrast to earlier in the play when he dreamt of some vile forfeit of untimely death, which shows that he chooses what to believe. His fickle character is perhaps highlighted here when he talks about presage, which, being an omen, often indicated bad things, yet it is joyful to him. The use of juxtaposition could reinforce Romeo's puzzlement and confusion. He has had no news, and anything that guides him to something hopeful is better than the isolation he must be feeling right now. The audience further sees that Romeo, as usual, is also guided by his heart, "my bosom's lord," and then I would take it a little bit further. But notice how I've actually embedded those quotes, kind of tracked them through the text. It's almost like a little bit like the language question, the how question. So you've really got to try and get in that analysis here and really think about how Shakespeare is presenting Romeo's thoughts and feelings. And don't forget, keep saying what you think he might be thinking, what you think he's feeling, what you are the audience, to keep repeating that phrase, audience, the audience, the audience. Okay? So use your quotes that you've selected. But again, this is optional. It's completely up to you. If you want a little practice with it, you might just prefer to explode the quotes. But again, it all depends on what you've done in lesson 1 as well. All right. So next lesson, we are going to go through the bigger question. So we're going to look at the 25 mark question, which will be on fate and destiny, which is what I've shown you at the beginning of this lesson and the beginning of last lesson as well. So it's up to you. I will be doing this, like I said before, in lesson 3, and I will be taking you through it. It depends how much preparation that you would like to do before you get to this question. Definitely lesson 1 needs to be done, and I would like you to do the extract question in lesson 2 in terms of annotating, and whether you decide to do the actual response is completely up to you. So good luck everyone, and I will see you in lesson 3. Goodbye.